The Deep End team acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we work and live, pays respect to elders past, present and future, and recognises the importance of Indigenous knowledge to informing public debate. Our guest on this episode of The Deep End is Anne Pattel-Gray. Anne Pattel-Gray is a Professor of Indigenous Studies and the inaugural head of the School of Indigenous Studies at the University of Divinity. She is a descendant of the Bidjara Karikari people of Queensland. She has held numerous leadership and consultancy roles in First Nations and not-for-profit organisations, including the World Council of Churches. In 1995, she was the first Aboriginal person to be awarded a PhD by the University of Sydney, which was published by Oxford University Press as The Great White Flood, Racism in Australia in 1998. She has held visiting professorships at Gurukul Theological Seminary, Harvard University and Otago University. She has been a critical and influential activist in seeking justice and equality for Indigenous peoples and developing cultural frameworks and practices built on respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities.
So Anne, welcome to the Deep End podcast, hosted by Aaron Corn and myself.
Welcome to the Deep End.
It's wonderful to see you after so many years. You do a mighty job as an Aboriginal Christian with a huge influence over many decades, and I thank you for your good work. You are also an academic and you're at the University of Divinity. So we're very much looking forward to hearing your views on the referendum question, recognition, and an advisory committee to make representations to Parliament and the Executive Government. We're on Bunurong Wurundjeri country here at the Victorian College of the Arts at our South Bank campus of the University of Melbourne. So Anne, please tell us a bit about yourself, what you're doing at the moment, and how you have achieved so much in your life.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity to share with you and to be a part of this podcast that you're doing. Look, I come from a background of being, born out in Western Queensland and, of course, raised in the church, as most of our people have been influenced or touched or in one way or another by Christianity. And one of the things that, as I was growing up, I was experiencing incredible racism within the church and trying to understand the hypocrisy of, their preaching about the Good Samaritan and so on, and the good works of Jesus with the outcast and the marginalised, and yet seeing the church do the complete opposite. And as a young person, I grew up raising questions about that kind of theological education or preaching from a very, I would say, racist perspective. And my mother was a staunch Aboriginal woman, and she influenced me quite a lot. And, we had things like being told, the Humidic curse, the curse of Ham, and as a result of that, all black races were cursed and to be subservient to white people. And I got taught that in Sunday school as a child, and I remember being the only black kid in the class and everyone's looking at me. I wanted the ground to swallow me up so I could disappear. Ran out to my mother just crying and sobbing, and Mum got my older brother to take me out to the car, and she came out and then was asking what was going on. And when I told her, she said, "We'll talk about it when we get home." And she just held me and hugged me. And then when we got home, she said, "Anne, you are created in the image of the Creator, and don't let anybody tell you anything less you are worthy, you are valued, and you have integrity. And being born an Aboriginal is something to be proud of. We're an ancient race, we've got ancient wisdom, and you're going to be walking on this land, and you're going to be able to follow in the footsteps of your ancestors. And, you know, that stayed with me a long time, and she always stated those things to me. And I would struggle and wrestle with, you know, the theology that was being taught to us, because, you know, it portrayed a Christianity, a colonial Christianity that determined that white people were the chosen ones and blessed by God to colonize the world. And through my years, I came to understand that was a colonial form of interpretation that the British used to justify theft of lands, massacres, you know, stolen children, the incarceration or slavery of our stolen generations, and so on. So the church, to me, had a lot to repent for and a lot to own in the way of what they've done to our people. And my Christianity isn't based on theirs. It's based and rooted in my traditional knowledge, culture, law and practice. And I choose to express it in a way that reflects a theological view. But I don't know if you would actually call it Christian. A lot of Christians wouldn't say I'm Christian. They'd probably call me a heretic and whatever else you want to call me. But yeah, I've been on this journey all my life. I've been a thorn in the side with the churches for all my life. I've been ostracised, marginalised, you name it. However, I just feel compelled to speak truth and speak into truth, but also expose injustices that the churches have committed and try to hold them accountable for their role in colonisation and missionisation and the subjugation and the poverty of our people, because they have a lot to answer for. So this is me in a nutshell, and now I've recently been appointed to the head of the School of Indigenous Studies with the University of Divinity, and that's been a long time coming. Historically, Aboriginal people could not go and study at denominational seminaries. We weren't welcome, we weren't included. They set up an inferior level of education for Aboriginal people, and that was through the vet system. And that's where we were forced to go. And for us who didn't want to go down that path, we stepped out of the church arena and their theological colleges and went to mainstream universities, to the schools of religious studies and so on, to get our degrees. And that's literally what I did. And here I am today, looking at how we can open theological education up for all of our people to have access to, but ensure that it's grounded in our traditional knowledge, because it's that perspective that brings the integrity and humanity and justice to how we interpret biblical narratives, but also interpret Christianity as a whole. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Anne. So tell us about your role at the University of Divinity and what you'll be doing.
At the University of Divinity, at the moment, I'm looking for funding. No surprise to anybody. I'm looking to be able to secure significant funding to be able to build our faculty, but I'm also looking at how we can collaborate with scholars like yourselves and Aaron across the country to be able to design and develop an undergraduate degree specifically for our people, incorporating traditional knowledge, law, practice, but also building on that a critical methodologies or critical thinking to be able to decolonize and deconstruct biblical narratives, Western theology, colonial Christianity, and to be able to challenge and cut through a lot of that history that justified theft of lands and genocide and all of the evils that has happened across this nation as a result of colonisation and the practice of a colonial Christianity. So we're looking at that at the moment, and I'm hoping to be able to do some significant research too at the moment, Marcia, and I'm looking for people who, corporations, funding, who might be interested in supporting some of our research, because what I want to do is to be able to document all government lands given to the churches in the 1900s and the legal basis in which this land was given to them, and how it's being used, and whether that basis is still relevant today, that legal basis, or if it's changed, and where at what time did public lands become private lands and private assets, because that's what's happened over the years. And we see now with the decline of mainstream churches or Western churches that they're selling a lot of these assets off. And that concerns me, because this is stolen land, and this is land that should be returned to Aboriginal people. So this is the importance of this research that we want to be able to do, is to be able to put that together and put it out there with a theological critique as well, and looking at the biblical narratives that justify the theft of lands from a biblical perspective. Beyond that also, I'm looking at other research. I'm wanting to document how churches and missionaries were involved in the construction and development of slavery in this country amongst First Nations people. You know, our missions and reserve were the institutions in which our children were taken and raised to be nothing more than servant class and servants to white people, and the abuse that they experience and the violence. This all needs to be documented, because, you know, competent people need to pay repatriations. There needs to be an acknowledgement of this history and its impact upon our people, and justice needs to be done, and people need to churches need to pay some form of compensation or repatriation to our people. So those are the significant researches that we think will advance our position towards treaty discussions and conversations and reparations, because quite often not enough focus has been given to the church, but in this case I want to make sure that it's done. We've got organisations like the London Missionary Societies that were here initially in Australia in the colonial period, who were given vast areas of land, and when native title came in through Mabo, these land holdings were exempted from native title, and I want to know why. And I want to be able to challenge the London Missionary Society, who is a filthy rich institution, to pay compensation or repatriation and return these lands. They're doing that at the moment across the globe in Africa and the Caribbean. They're paying compensation for slavery. And I think, you know, we need to be able to hold them accountable as well in their dealings here in Australia. So that's kind of the breadth. We're looking at also academic accreditation in the sense of looking at how do we give recognition to our knowledge holders and our knowledge keepers that exist in our country across the different language groups. How do we give them academic recognition within our institutions for the knowledge that they hold and what they bring to the table for us. These things are really, really important to us because they are the foundation of our identity and who we are, our law, our culture, and everything. So these are some of the questions we're looking into at the moment and investigating, because I'd like to look at that, but also looking at what other forms of academic assessments can be put into place that is not limited to 250,000 word thesis, but allows our people to maybe do a magnificent art piece and where they can stand and talk for a couple of hours in oratory, presenting the depth of knowledge that's in that art piece. There's so many different ways that we can give recognition to that knowledge, and we need to be able to incorporate it into these Western systems that we now are a part of.
I think most of our listeners would have no idea what you're talking about when you're referring to the curse of Ham. Can we go back to that for a minute? Because, I think what you've addressed there is now, part of mostly a bygone world. But I note that there are still Pentecostalists who teach this rubbish, especially American Pentecostalists, and it's pretty disturbing to me that this medieval nonsense can continue in a modern society, but here we are. And I think it is at least partly one of the justifications for the dreadful racism that we've seen during the campaign. So tell us about this idea of the curse of Ham, please.
Yeah, well, the curse of Ham is an Old Testament reading that basically the West has used to justify its subjugation of Aboriginal people. And I'm just looking at something here for you. It's Ham's in Hebrew, according to the book of Genesis. We talk about the son of Noah and the father of Cush and Miriam, and Ham is a descendant. And Ham's looked upon his father in a state of nakedness. And of course, as a result of that, was cursed by God because he saw his father in that state. And as a result of that curse, he was basically cursed by God to be forever inferior and a slave, and all his descendants would be slaves to a superior race of people. And Noah at the time, of course, was a patriarch, and we talk about this interpretation that is taught within Sunday schools, and it was taught pretty well a lot across all the denominations here in this country. And the fact that Ham saw his father's, Noah's, drunkenness and his nakedness, basically fell on Ham being cursed rather than Noah being held accountable for all Ham got the curse. And this then was justified as a way of all black-skinned people across the globe being inferior, and the justification of slavery of all black races as well. So this is the interpretation that was given, and therefore when it comes to Aboriginal people within this country, that was the interpretation taught as well through colonisation. And many of us Aboriginal people who were a part of the church encountered this interpretation in one way or another, even though we challenged it, because it was a very racist and colonial interpretation that was brought to this text. and used as a way to justify all manner of colonial evils that took place. So that's basically where it comes from the biblical text of Noah, and looking at it in Genesis 9 is the original story, and it goes through from there. So, yeah, that's where we're up to with that.
And it remains very much an inspiration for the Ku Klux Klan, doesn't it?
Oh, very much so, very much so. It's a justification used by a lot of racist institutions, peoples, societies, as to, the justification of our inferiority.
But to be clear, the actual text in the Old Testament doesn't refer to skin colour at all, does it?
No, it doesn't necessarily refer to it, but because Ham and his descendants are dark, that's how the justification came in.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And everyone that is born that is black, and that's how slavery took place all around the world through colonisation. Because as far as their interpretation was, we were there to serve them, the chosen people, the white race.
And that's very much a very late interpretation. When did this interpretation of that part of Noah come about?
Through colonisation. As the West were colonising, this interpretation came about through that period of time. So 18 and 1900s is where that text, basically, that interpretation came, because it was a justification for the evil way they treated Indigenous peoples and black peoples around the world. You know what I mean? Their God gave them that right to treat people that way because they're a cursed race, and therefore they deserve nothing better except to be treated in the manner that they were treated, as how would you say, to be exploited physically and sexually and every other way by this so-called Christian race that existed around the globe.
How many Christian leaders today propound this nonsense?
It would be very interesting, Marcia, to ask that question, because not many would be bold enough to articulate that out loud. But I would say a lot secretly would hold to that ideology. And that's what makes it really sad. When you see a lot of the negativity that exists and that is being expressed currently by Christian people, people who profess to be Christian, this would be some of the basis on why they would justify themselves voting no.
So you've been trying to convince your Christian friends to vote yes. Tell me what you say to them.
Look, what's interesting is, I don't want them to, and basically what I say, we're not going to politicise the statement from the heart, and we're not going to intellectualise it, because it's a statement from the heart. It is an emotive statement. It is a statement that extends the grace of God to this nation to not only recognise us as the oldest living culture in the world, but to recognise us as the first peoples of this land, and to also give us a voice. We've been silenced for so long. History and documentation, governments, policies have never consulted with us. And it's time we were able to influence policies about our destiny, and particularly the destiny of our children. We want our children to thrive, not struggle to survive. And this country has not provided them that opportunity thus far. And we hope that, by giving us a voice, as small as it is, it's a first step towards the next step towards reconciliation. It's a small step, but a necessary one. And we hope that, people will embrace that. So when I talk to Christians, I talk to them about, the grace of God that is extended to us as Christian people when we become saved, if you want to put it that way, and become Christians. Our sins are forgiven and overlooked. And here we have, and it's through that grace that God extends to us, that we are then born again, if you want to put it that way, but we are then able to start with a clean slate. And here we have, some humility that has been extended by my people. And, our people are such gracious people. They truly are. They're always extending the hand of friendship, of collaboration, of relationship. It's always them. I rarely see white people extending any hand to us as a way of wanting to further a relationship. So it's interesting today when I talk to church leaders, I talk to them about our history, the failures of the church, the reason for churches to repent, but more importantly, the mandate given to us by God to be Christ's ambassadors for reconciliation and justice. Now, that's a question I've got to hold them accountable for, because how have you done that? Historically, you failed miserably. So are you prepared to do it now? And this is an opportunity for the churches to be prophetic, to take a bold stance, and to stand up and lead this nation by the mandate given to them to be able to do justice and deliver it, and to take that next step in our process of reconciliation. The referendum, what is being proposed, has no impact upon an individual's life that is not First Nations, except to have an impact of integrity and a question of integrity. Because come the day of referendum, this nation will be judged on that integrity as to whether they will see this nation, this country, as a country that is racist, that is founded on bigotry, and that continues to be colonial, to reject a gracious extension of hand to from our First Nations people to the rest of this country. It'd be a total embarrassment, I would say. The world is watching. I sit on the World Council of Churches committees, and they're watching. They're watching to see what is going to be the outcome. But more importantly, they're watching to see what the position and the stances that are taken by the churches, who should be leading this discussion, not sitting back waiting for government to do it. They should be driving the agenda because they've been mandated with this agenda. So it's interesting to see, how their relationship with government is in some ways so colluded that, they're fearful of losing government funding if they take too strong of a stance, which is really disappointing. But what can you say? There's conservative Christians in this country that hold to a very racist and bigoted view about who we are as a people, who are fearful of us, who feel threatened by us. And that's pretty sad that they come with these views, because, they allow themselves to be influenced by other racists and people with misinformation, and who are doing nothing more than just creating mischief. And that suits them fine, because they want to have some justification for their position. So they'll grab hold of these misconstrued statements and ideology that exists out there.
A lot of people are saying they're coming to take, the Aborigines are coming to take our land, Aborigines are going to get more rights than us. When people say that to you, what do you say to them?
Well, one, it's a question of how ignorant are you about your own history, because to make those kind of statements is a reflection of one's ignorance, because, originally this land did belong to the First Nations people, and, we've got to look at that history of colonisation and theft of land, and which left us in poverty and marginalised and disenfranchised. So when do we begin to address history in that context of moving the pendulum back to the middle, or maybe a little bit more to the left, in order that Aboriginal people can prosper and have opportunities in this country, because that doesn't exist currently as we stand now. But beyond that, we've got to be able to look at how we educate people. Marcia, successive governments have failed in this country to educate its citizens about our shared history. And that's really sad, because that's where those sort of ignorant statements come from, because people haven't been educated and have not had access to that level of education. That doesn't mean they can't educate themselves now today. There's enough literature and information around if they want to educate themselves. But 9 times out of 10, you're talking about an older generation that is steadfast in a very colonial view set, that would have the opinion that we get too much, we get everything given to us, we're unappreciative, we're lazy, we're drunks, we're, a burden on this society. And that's ignorant people, because they don't know anything about how we've contributed to the development of this country and what we've brought to the table, but also about how much has been taken and needs to be now addressed and rectified in some just forms.
But the fact is, non-Indigenous Australians will lose nothing by voting yes. We're not going to take their land. Not. We're not going to take their land. No. The referendum question asks them to agree to recognising us as First Peoples, that's right, given that our ancestors came here more than 60,000 years ago, and for an advisory committee.
Exactly. And that's what I said, for the average Australian to vote yes, this has no implication on their personal life or welfare or economics. It is just a question of integrity at the end of the day. The referendum will reflect what that level of integrity is going to be. But, it has no impact upon them, except perhaps, recognition or integrity to recognise our historic rights as First Nations peoples. And that's about it. We're the people we would hope would prosper out of this opportunity. And our children, hopefully, will prosper. That's, this is where I question and challenge Christians. How could you want to deny First Nation people that? Something that you have taken for granted all your life, and the privilege and the wealth that you've gained out of colonisation. You are inheritors of that history. And, it's time to address that history, but in a way of setting it right by recognising, as I said, First Nations people, and giving us a voice to be able to speak into policies and laws around our future and our destiny. As I said, it has no influence or impact upon them as individuals and their well-being. So it is going to be interesting, Marcia, because I can't understand the negativity that exists out there at the moment, and the absolute garbage that's being, touted by different right-wing organisations and racist associations. It's just mind-boggling.
Anne Pattel-Gray, this has been far too short, and we really hope to continue this conversation with you again post-referendum about all the things you've touched on. It's absolutely fascinating and vital that people understand this space and the different lenses through which you are engaged in, both through your own work and discussions with other people that you intersect with. And I know for a fact will definitely talk offline about some of the academic and educational initiatives you touched on too. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and we really hope to see you again soon, and hang in there.
Thank you so much, and God bless, and keep the faith and keep the strength that goes with that.
Thanks for your strength, Anne.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful
Thank
to
you so much.
Wonderful to hear from you today.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.